Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel, Colonati. Today I'm going to talk about a book I just finished reading, and that is The Witness for the Dead by Katherine Addison. This is a companion novel to Addison's previous very beloved book, The Goblin Emperor, which came out in 2014. Though I do want to emphasize that The Witness for the Dead is not a sequel. In fact, I don't even know if companion novel is a good description there. This is merely set in the same world as the Goblin Emperor and during the reign of the Emperor Maya. I do actually think that it probably is best to start by reading the Goblin Emperor if you don't know anything about this world. The Goblin Emperor is just, first of all, it's a beautiful book, but I think it does maybe a better job of explaining the world and the naming system and all this complicated politics stuff. The protagonist of The Witness for the Dead is an elven man named Celehar. He was introduced as a minor but important character in The Goblin Emperor. He does an investigation for Maya in that one, and his pretty tragic backstory and his connections to well-to-do families and stuff are explained in that book and kind of repeated here, but not in detail. He is a witness for the dead, a pretty unusual role. I think this is because he does have a rather rare magical talent where he can touch a dead person's body and he can see or relive their last moments. So he can witness or speak for the dead. I think that he kind of trained as a priest. He's described as a prelate, I believe. And I imagine this basically that he went to like seminary school, he had a religious education, and then he turned to this particular role, which is kind of like a death investigator and a funeral director rolled into one. And it's just a role with a bit of a magical element that really lends itself to some interesting murder mysteries. And that is what this book is. The main part of this story is that Celehar is asked to find out who a dead woman is. They fish this anonymous woman out of the canals. She's been clearly murdered before she was thrown in, but they don't know who she is. And they cannot bury her until they know who she is because of the very complicated religious sects in this world. They have to know what funeral practices to use for her. So Celehar has to identify her. Then, because she was clearly murdered, he has to find out more about her life, talk to people who knew her, and narrow down suspects for who killed her and why, so that he can tell her story and speak for her. There's also a lot of other stuff going on, because while that is the main mystery, it's his daily job to sit in an office and wait for petitioners to come to him with questions and tasks, so he gets pulled into other mysteries as well. He's basically trying to catch a serial killer in this too. At one point he has to get out of the city for a couple of days, and he's sent to deal with a ghoul in a distant county. So he has to go stop this thing that is turned from eating dead people to eating living people. Bit of an action sequence there. Frankly, that bit of this reminded me a little bit of like Sherlock Holmes and the Hound of the Baskervilles. I don't know, I'm not really sure why, but maybe I was also very struck by some of the similarities between The Witness for the Dead and Katherine Addison's previous book, The Angel of the Crows, which is a fantasy retelling of Sherlock Holmes stories. I honestly think that The Witness for the Dead, in terms of the mysteries and the plots here, and even the setting, might have more in common with The Angel of the Crows than with The Goblin Emperor, probably because it's just this completely different end of the social spectrum, but also because it's murder mysteries. So where was I going with that? Basically, Celehar is very busy, and every task that he completes ends up with him promising to do a task for one other person, which leads him to do something for somebody else, and then to do something for somebody else. It's just this like chain reaction effect, which I found really interesting. What I got out of this story is that Celehar is a very quiet man carrying a lot of grief. He's been very broken by some things, and he is lonely and doing a very thankless and difficult job that he values but nobody else does. And it kind of broke my heart at times to see how much he was giving to people, how much he could have said no, but he chose to say yes instead, and he gets very, very little in return. And now part of that is because he won't necessarily accept more, or he won't ask for more. He's very humble in that way, but it goes from being humility to being more like he doesn't value his own life enough. He doesn't place enough worth on himself and what he's doing, and that is detrimental. He shouldn't be doing that. People who care about him point this out to him multiple times and say, maybe you should kind of push back a little bit. You should stand up for yourself a little bit and ask for more, value this more. And he won't. I think a lot of it is just because he's still processing the terrible things that he went through. I do think that there is character development though. This book is going to have a sequel, a direct sequel. I think the title right now is The Grief of Stones, and I'm so happy that there's going to be another book because I don't think that Celehar's story is done yet. There are these glimmers of how he might kind of be moving on and moving forward and making new friends, meeting new people. I mean, I loved Pel-Thenhior. I hope that Pel-Thenhior comes back, and I'm shipping the two of them so hard. So I want to see more of the journey that this character goes on, and I want to see more of his investigations and the mysteries he solves and the people that he helps, because that's also just very satisfying. Now, as much as I've talked about the plot here, I don't actually think that the mysteries in this are its strongest point. In fact, I think that the mysteries might be the weakest bit of this book, and maybe the least satisfying, in that they're kind of tangled, they interrupt each other, and they kind of get wrapped up in a bit more anticlimactic way than I was expecting. On the other hand, that suits the more quiet nature of the book. But I think that what this does best, where I think a lot of the emphasis was instead, was on the character study, if you will. Like, what is the type of person we're reading about? What are we learning about him? What are we learning about the people around him and how they treat him? What are we learning about this world and the social rules and customs and everything? So I think the characters are the really bright spot of this book, and the world building continues to be very complex and rich and interesting and well thought out and consistent. So yes, this is written well. It really made me care about the characters. I just wanted to see all of these daily interactions between people. I wasn't necessarily as enthralled by the action sequences or the mysteries being unraveled. I just wanted to be with the characters and seeing them grow and everything. So I am very excited about the sequel to this, and I would definitely recommend this to people who enjoyed The Goblin Emperor, but I would put a pretty heavy warning on it that it is a different type of story about a very different type of character living in a very different part of society. So the feel of this book overall is not necessarily going to match people's expectations after having read The Goblin Emperor, but both are very worth reading in my opinion. So I think I've waffled on enough about this book and hopefully given you a little bit of a feel for what it is like and what it is about. It is a slim little book. You can probably read the entire thing in one day if you really like it, and it was enjoyable and made me want more, and it gave me a kind of a pleasant ache, I guess, that it wasn't perfectly happy, but it wasn't perfectly sad either. Does that make sense? Anyway, if you have read The Witness for the Dead, let me know, leave me your thoughts down below. I would love to talk to you about it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon. And until then, bye.